Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 21 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Well, there is so much going on right now. It's almost a case of which subjects do I address. But it's also becoming a bit of a comedy. And the good news is that more and more people are seeing through the comedy and watching the machinations and the manipulations and the backtracking of the mainstream media surely is beginning to wake up even the most moribund brain out there. Of course, since my last show, we've had the James Foley saga with the media ramping up this beheading, which basically anybody could pretty much see was clearly a faked film. Of course, eventually it took a film expert to present to the mainstream media the hypothesis that the whole thing might just have been faked. And of course, there are many people now investigating these false flag events. I remember just 13 years ago, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, there was barely about 24 of us around the globe researching the events in the immediate aftermath of that charade. Now, of course, there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who know very well that the events of 9/11 were certainly not as they were cracked up by the mainstream media. And call it a hunch, but I would say a certain Russian president is holding an ace card right now. And one has to wonder at what point he decides to play that ace and reveal what Russia knows about the events of 9/11. Putin is demonstrating that he is a master statesman, whereas in the UK, the people that we have as the political elite are to statesmanship what myxomatosis is to rabbits. So needless to say that I don't have too much respect for the British political elite. And in fact, yesterday at an event in Glastonbury, I asked the audience, how many people are proud to be British? And only one young man put his hand up. And when I asked him what it was about Britain that he was proud of, he actually had to think about it for a few seconds before he said, the football. Well, after England's performance at the World Cup, I wouldn't even class football as anything that we can be proud of. In fact, it's the old joke, isn't it? What do you call an Englishman in the second round of the World Cup? Ref. Well, meanwhile, back to the charade. And on Sunday, when was it? Sunday. Gosh, I'm losing track of days. Today is Tuesday. We're a day late. But on Sunday in the media, we had this in the Sun: Ukraine at point of no return. It's war. Well, this is, of course, exactly what the West wants. They are trying to ramp up the excuse to launch World War III. If they can't do it via Israel, if they can't do it via ISIS, more of which in a second, then let's try it on with the Ukraine. And of course, as I mentioned previously, a big part of this is to try to demonize Russia in the same way that Saddam Hussein was demonized in the aftermath of Gulf War I, in an attempt to shut off Russian gas from coming in to the eastern side of Europe. So who's going to provide that much needed gas? Which, by the way, of course, the UK takes none. So despite Cameron's occasional reference to the UK needing Russian gas, that is a total lie. And in fact, the most recent DEC report states that perhaps the UK gets as much as 0.4% of its gas from Russia. And that's just based on an estimate of gas that's imported from Europe, and some of which might have originated from Russia. But who's going to ride in to save the day? Well, that would be none other than the US of A, who now have such a surplus of shale gas, having fracked the country almost into oblivion. Now they want to export that, and they need to create a market. So shut off the Russian gas and then present the shale gas to the EU. Well, that's the Ukraine. Enough for that for the moment. Then let's look at King David here, trying to ramp up the terrorism, the threat of terrorism. Islamic State likely to attack UK, warns Cameron. Well, of course, let's not forget that a year ago, Cameron was trying to hold a vote in Parliament to effectively support the Islamic State terrorists, because allegedly Assad had unleashed chemical weapons on the civilian population of Syria. But in reality, of course, that unfortunate incident was actually perpetrated by the rebels. But Cameron and Obama desperately wanted to get Assad out. So back then, the Islamic State was the West's ally. Now, all of a sudden, we've changed the tune. In other words, basically, the Islamic State have now got enough toys so that they can make a real fight of it. I mean, where do these guys get their hardware? Is there a page on Amazon or eBay that, I haven't found? Because, I'm sure there's more than a few people in this country that, given the opportunity, might feel it appropriate right now to resort to, should I say, more aggressive means, unfortunately. Meanwhile, of course, these people in the middle of nowhere where the internet signal probably isn't that great seem to be able to lay their hands on whatever it is they need. Well, actually, just a little aside there, some of you may have seen recently that a supertanker was apparently lost on the high seas, and this was a supertanker carrying $100 million worth of oil from the Kurdish region of Iraq. And this tanker has actually turned up in the Gulf of Mexico. So it was obviously shipping oil into the US. And the US, of course, then will be paying the Kurdish rebels somewhere in the region, about $100 million, so they can arm themselves to the teeth. And then, of course, they've got the toys to create yet more conflict in the area. The Machiavellian machinations of the socio-psychopathic global corporatists know absolutely no limits. Meanwhile, of course, Britain is being turned into a country where, it seems that even the police, here we have, this is, I believe, Cardiff Airport, this is Heathrow, actually, this one. This is the IS, the Islamic State, expected to attack in weeks. So we've got to have police there armed with submachine guns. And this one, Islamic State, our worst terror threat UK has known. Well, we should know because in all probability, the usual suspects were responsible for training these jihadists. Well, this actually got my attention. The SAS are braced for horror like Mumbai. I didn't realise the SAS were involved in Mumbai, but there you go. Well, meanwhile, if there is any kind of attack in the UK, we all know. And you know what? Cameron and his cronies and all the scriptwriters know that we know, that they know we know, that if there is any event that occurs which is presented as terrorism, it will be, of course, scripted by the usual suspects. Here we see them. And this is the Mossad, CIA, MI6, dark elements of. I'm not suggesting that every single member of Mossad or CIA or MI6 is part of this dark group, but there are certainly rogue elements in each of these secret services that are more than capable of unleashing and managing these events. And of course, one thing that we must watch out for in the UK is if this particular individual rears his head. This is none other than Peter Power. The man, I'm not suggesting for one moment that Peter Power was involved in the events of 7/7, a little over 9 years ago now in the UK, where quite coincidentally, 4 bombs went off at exactly the same 4 underground stations where he was running an exercise that morning. Well, Peter Power, I think, is astute enough to realise that he had been commissioned to run this exercise to provide the cover so that if anything had gone wrong, it could simply have been blamed on the exercise. Which is why Peter Power was in such a hurry to get his face in front of the TV cameras and on the radio on the afternoon of 7/7 to effectively ensure that he put sufficient distance between himself, his company, Visor Consultants, and the event of that day. But Peter Power is regarded as a safe pair of hands. In other words, regardless of what he knows, he ain't going to spill the beans. And here we are 9 years later, and he has never been called to account for exactly what he was doing on that day back in July of 2005. Well, sadly, Cameron may be on the brink of ordering airstrikes on Iraq without asking MPs. Well, of course he's not going to ask the MPs, because the last time he did that, he got defeated in the Commons. This was a little over a year ago, 53 weeks ago, in fact, to be accurate. And on that date, Cameron lost that vote. It was very close. 13 MPs voting 285 to 272, so a majority of 13 MPs. So in other words, if 7 MPs had voted differently, then we would by now be in World War III. But of course we're not. And Cameron is being instructed to get it to the point where World War III can be initiated. So he now wants to order the airstrikes. Well, once again, the British public have to do what they did last year, which is get in touch with your MP. I mean, as you're going to see this week, and I think in every week, it's time to engage in the process. Once upon a time, it was apathy rules. Well, let me tell you right now, it's apathy kills. And there's going to be a lot of civilian deaths that will result in the event of apathy amongst the British public. We have to get in touch with our MPs, with their offices, just as we did last year, and let them know that there is absolutely no support whatsoever for another illegal war. And another wonderful piece of artwork from my good friend Dave Dees. I've named this Israel. The number of Palestinians that have been killed, and particularly the disproportionate amount of children, is a war crime of the highest order. And I know that many of us visualize the day when Tony Blair, George Bush, Barack Obama, Benjamin Netanyahu, Perez, and many others all appear before the international courts to face the charges of their war crimes. Well, I said apathy kills. Well, forgive me, but I expected a little more reaction from the population of Wales. And over the past week, 10 days or so, I have seen pictures coming out of Cardiff which are absolutely appalling. But where is the reaction? It just seems as though these fences, 10 miles apparently, of these fences have been erected around Cardiff and even more in Newport, literally segregating the population from those who effectively are nothing more than the puppets of those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. And why do they do this? I mean, we're getting all the rhetoric, of course, about the terror attacks, but it has nothing to do with that at all. This is simply conditioning. It is programming for what is coming. And what the British population are demonstrating, in this case the good people of South Wales, is that that's okay, just come along and erect fences in our cities, and, we're not going to do anything about it at all. And if you want to go for a nice walk in the park, well, you can just take a stroll alongside this fence and walk your dog alongside a fence. Have a picnic the other side of the fence. Gosh, it's like a zoo, and who is one side and who is the other? Well, and then we have a picture here, if I can get this one up. Look at this, a nice drive in the country. This is looking more like the West Bank than South Wales. What is going on here? Come on, people of South Wales. I know you're going to have a number of people come down and help out next week. And let me say, I hope that with all my heart, that the people that go to Cardiff next week, that they go to with peace in their heart. And it's a peaceful protest. But it's time to demonstrate just how creative one can be with peaceful protest. If there is any attempt at stimulating violence there, that will be agent provocateur. And the onus will be on the peaceful protesters to expose the agent provocateurs. You can generally spot them. They're generally carrying a black backpack. And when they are arrested, keep your eye on them, because what will happen is that they will be taken to the rear and then the handcuffs will be let off and then they'll be just pushed away. You know, this is a very ugly business. So, interesting times. You know, we have Israel that would seem to have realized that it is losing global support. You know, it is my opinion that the Israeli government set out to deliberately ramp up the anti-Jewish feeling around the world in an attempt to force Jewish communities to leave their host countries and go to Israel and, of course, bring all their assets with them. But fortunately, you know, more and more members of the diaspora, of the expatriate Jewish people, are letting it be known that they do not support the aggressive agenda of the Zionist Jewish government of Israel. So whilst that plays out in the Middle East, here in the UK and in the US, the onus is on us to make sure that the socio-psychopaths that have been manipulated into public office do not start another illegal war on the basis of the best interests of the population. Meanwhile, we have another very interesting event occurring in literally just a couple of weeks' time. And I've received many texts and emails asking for a comment or two on Scottish independence. Well, obviously, I'm not Scottish. But nonetheless, I consider that every member of the British Isles does indeed have the right to speak out on this, because obviously we will all be affected by the decision, whatever that decision may be. So, September the 18th, a date that actually resonates with me, because that happens to be the date that I actually arrived on this mortal coil, although hearsay has it. Well, is it going to be a day that is as perhaps impactful as an Independence Day of another nature? Well, this is a truly, truly unique opportunity. And what I would like to do over the next few minutes is just outline some of what I perceive to be the opportunities and also the potential risks. I did watch the last debate between Alistair Darling and Alex Salmond, and whilst I certainly concur that Salmond had the upper hand, for me, he's just not going far enough. And actually, if you're voting on the basis of what Salmond is presenting, then I think you could be in for a world of hurt. Having said that, I appreciate it's one hurdle at a time. You know, the unique aspect of Scotland is in possession of an enormous amount of black gold. And the reason it's called black gold is because there is a very close relationship between the price of oil and the price of gold. In fact, if we go back over 60 plus years, we can see that the price of a barrel of oil has always been approximately 7.66% of an ounce of gold. A little bit of fluctuation either side, but around about 7.66%. So once you know roughly what sort of reserves you're sitting on, you can calculate what kind of resources you have in terms of currency. So let's just have a look at Scotland's legacy here, if you like. This is what Scotland has: an enormous amount of access to the offshore oil fields in the North Sea. And off of the coast of England, we have the offshore gas fields. So obviously there would be a little bit of trade perhaps there between England and Scotland, oil for gas and all that. Well, a lot of the estimates of Scotland's oil reserves are being based upon the input of Sir Ian Wood, who, by the way, has a personal fortune that's estimated to be well in excess of $1 billion. So I think we can be fairly confident that Sir Ian Wood will be looking after his own financial well-being rather than the potential benefits to his birth country. Well, even he is estimating that there are 15 years of oil left in Scottish waters before Scotland would need to sort of rein in the horns a bit. But a hell of a lot can happen in 15 years. I mean, let's remember that about the same time ago, we were hearing all the scare stories of peak oil. And as I was trying to explain at the time, there is no such thing as peak hydrocarbons. The hydrocarbons industry knows exactly where the next generation of hydrocarbons are and the generation after that. The fact that we don't need them is neither here nor there. We are in the grip of a hydrocarbon-driven economy. Well, if we look at the way in which oil is explored for, then we would also recognise that to find things you've got to look for it, and for many years, because we thought we knew where there was enough oil for the next 100 years, no one was looking for it. Well, the Clare Ridge, which is effectively, I think, owned by BP, or BP has a license to exploit the Clare Ridge. The Clare Ridge has been a known resource for many years, but we haven't had the technology by which to exploit it. And in fact, David Cameron has actually been rather desperate to keep the knowledge about the resources of Clare Ridge under wraps, which is why he's been making secret trips to the Shetland Isles. So here's potentially another enormous resource. And based on the fact that Scotland will, of course, be investing in seismic exploration, I think there's a very good chance that Scotland will find even more. But Scotland also has access to another resource, which is predicted to become increasingly scarce, particularly if the hydraulic fracturing agenda continues to grow exponentially around the world and indeed kicks off in the UK. And that's water. And if we look at a document here that I encourage you to go read it for yourself, the Water Resource Plan, it's now 5 years old. I'm sure it's been updated. There's certainly one more recent iteration. But one aspect of this was a look at the change in rainfall in the period between 1961 and 1990 and what is forecast for the 2020s. And this is by month. And what you see in Scotland is overall an increase in rainfall and a decrease in England. And so consequently, if the hydraulic fracturing agenda really does kick off in the UK, which of course I'm going to be doing everything that I possibly can to make sure it doesn't, unfortunately there's a hell of a lot of other people with the same motivation, then this would be a lot worse. So potentially, Scotland not only is sitting on black gold, but it might also be sitting on this white gold. But now, that's a massive, massive motivation for Scotland to vote yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about how it can perhaps even better manage that in a little while. But I want to raise the issue of Ireland, because the danger is that an independent Scotland is effectively manipulated in the same way that Ireland was manipulated. If we have a look here, Ireland actually has 23% of European territorial waters, simply because of its geographic location at the far western edge of the EU. So in theory, Ireland should be providing 23% of all European fish market. Unfortunately, corrupt Irish politicians sold a significant chunk of Irish waters to the EU for a one-off payment of €6 billion. Consequently, Ireland is simply now only permitted to fish just 4% of the EU fishing quota. And this was a manipulation. Obviously, you find the weak link. You find a politician that is corruptible or certainly has skeletons in the cupboard, and that's pretty much everybody at the moment, isn't it? And you just tell them what it is that you want them to do. The same with the Corrib gas field, which is now exploited by Shell off the coast of County Mayo. It was estimated a few years ago that this field had a notional value somewhere between 10 and 100 billion euros, depending on the capacity for extraction. In other words, an enormous resource. Well, again, the corrupt Irish government basically gave Shell and all the other oil companies a free ride. No state shareholding in the projects and no royalties payable. You know, at the very least, this screams of malfeasance. Immediate write-off of development and exploration expenditure, corporation taxes of 25%, but in this case they were reduced to 12.5% for downstream manufacturing. Capital allowances of up to 120%. In other words, the Irish government effectively paying another 20% of cost towards the initial capital expenditure. And so it goes on. I mean, this is just outrageous. The bottom line is there was nobody in the Irish government that had any experience of this industry, and they were effectively being led by the nose by Shell. And the individual in Ireland that was primarily responsible for this was Ray Burke. Now, it's reported that he acknowledged that he sold the tax exemption to Shell. I believe this is the man who, when he was asked about some unexplained funds in his bank account, claimed that he'd had a good day at the races. So this is the kind of legacy, probably, that you're going to get if the likes of Ray Burke get in, because in Ireland, it's not just the offshore fields, but it's also the massive Loch Allen Basin shale gas resource right in the heart of Ireland. So, who was the guy who manipulated all this? Well, it was an Irishman. It was none other than Sutherland. Here we have. And this guy, Peter Sutherland, an Irishman by accident at birth, very, very well connected. Just have a look at some of his connections here. He's a former Attorney General of Ireland. After he was the Attorney General, he became an EU Commissioner. He was chairman of Allied Irish Banks. He was the founding Director General of the World Trade Organization. He was one of the founders of the European branch of the Trilateral Commission. Former chairman of BP. Former board member of the Royal Bank of Scotland. He was on the board when it collapsed in 2008 and was actually paid to resign his commission there. And he's a chairman of Goldman Sachs International. Well, he has a lot more connections than this, but he was also connected with these people here. Here we have Dermot Gleeson and Paul Gallagher. Dermot Gleeson was chairman of Anglo-Irish Bank. Paul Gallagher was the Attorney General of Ireland in 2008. And Brian Lenihan in the bottom left there, the former Chancellor, and Brian Cowen, the former Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister. Well, these four people were effectively instructed to meet at midnight on September the 29th of 2008. Who instructed them to attend that meeting? Yes, none other than Peter Sutherland. Whilst I can't prove that he was actually present at that meeting, then he was certainly orchestrating that meeting, and it was on that day that he effectively instructed the Irish government to underwrite all assets and liabilities of the Irish banks, thus setting the wheels in motion for the total collapse of the Irish economy, of course, resulting in the need for a bailout. Now, rather than simply dismissing the debt, unfortunately, the Irish government bought it all hook, line and sinker. So what's the relevance of this for Scotland? Well, literally just a few months later, the Royal Bank of Scotland collapsed under the leadership of Sir Fred Goodwin, Fred the Shred, and Sir Tom McKillop. Now, these guys, in my opinion, were way out of their depth, and they were effectively manipulated. And in my opinion, one of the primary purposes here of effectively destroying the Royal Bank of Scotland was to weaken the country in the face of possible independence. So here he is, smiling Fred the Shred. Now, you've got to be real careful with the vote, that these individuals are not manipulated into roles where they themselves can effectively be manipulated by the globalists into bringing about Scottish subjugation to the EU. This is a chart here. You can find this online. This was, I think, first published by Business Insider. You can find a high-quality version of this so you can expand it. And you can look at all of the Bilderbergers in that centre ring, and you can look at their connections. Now, in the debate, Alex Salmond said that he was planning on going to Westminster and proposing that Scotland keep the pound sterling. What is that all about? Absolutely not. This is a great opportunity for genuine Scottish independence. Create your own Bank of Scotland. Get rid of the Rothschilds' central banking system. Scotland has sufficient natural resources to underwrite the creation of whatever currency it wants to create. It has an opportunity to stimulate the Scottish economy like never before. Either Alex Salmond just doesn't understand the way in which the central banking system works, or he is simply a puppet of the global corporatists, and he is being manipulated into creating a situation where Scotland will eventually become a colony of the EU, just like Ireland is today. So, obviously, you're not going to use the Royal Bank of Scotland. Create your own central bank. Create your own currency. Call it a pound. Call it a Clyde. Call it whatever you like. But you establish an exchange rate. And let me tell you that when you start exporting your oil and you make it clear that this oil can only be purchased in the Scottish currency, then obviously those countries that want to purchase Scottish oil will need to acquire the Scottish currency. And this is what will create trade. Now, this isn't radical. This is using a model that's already out there. And I'm not talking about Iceland, because the Iceland model started out as an ideal, but unfortunately it's become somewhat corrupted. But a model that has stood the test of time is the model of the economy of North Dakota. This is the only state in the US that isn't part of the Federal Reserve. So the Bank of North Dakota requires all of its state departments to bank with the Central Bank of North Dakota. Now, admittedly, obviously, this is it's a very large area. It's about 40% larger than England. But the population of North Dakota is just 60% of the population of Devon, which is why when North Dakota opted out of the Federal Reserve back in 1922, the Federal Reserve bankers just decided to let it do its own thing. Well, here we are, 90-odd years on, 92 years on, and it is the only state that is effectively financially independent. So there's the model. Take a look at North Dakota. It works for North Dakota. It can work for Scotland. Well, Gordon Brown, of course, threw his hat into the ring, saying that the yes vote will mean huge cuts to your NHS. Really? Well, you know, if Scotland follows the sort of model that I'm talking about here, then Scotland will have the resources to effectively rebuild the NHS that is being destroyed by Westminster right now. And in fact, here we go, an article literally from a few days ago, the secret sellout of Scotland's NHS. So it's already happening. It's already being undermined. There's a lot of rebuilding that has to go on here. And with the right people at the helm, then that can certainly be achieved. Let's just have a look at the article here. It says, the angry response comes as this newspaper today exposes a long-running campaign to manipulate health board spending figures to hide the full extent of private sector involvement. Ministers boast that only 80 million of hospital funding is privatised, but in fact almost 500 million went to subcontractors last year, almost 5% of Holyrood's annual NHS budget. Well, the one thing that we absolutely know for sure is that once you outsource healthcare spending, it's not more efficient. You are milked by the privateers. Unfortunately, benign capitalism is long dead. And what we have today is just rampant corporatism. But there's something even more obnoxious that Scotland is going to have to face up to. And an independent Scotland needs to face up to it sooner rather than later. And here we have Lord Robertson, the former head of NATO. But I had to requote this actually from almost a year ago. He said, in Flanders, in Belgium, they say, why can't we become an independent state? Or Catalonia in Spain, where 1.25 million people march down the streets. They say they want to become an independent state, but they've got language and culture and all these sorts of things. We, Scotland, don't have any of that. Well, that's what one of your illustrious Scottish elite thinks. But, this guy was effectively put into the NATO role pending some revelations about his involvement with Thomas Hamilton, who was, of course, responsible for the Dunblane massacre. And let me just read you this. Blair government insider Lord Robertson threatened to sue Scotland's leading independent newspaper over internet allegations that he not only used his influence as a Freemason to procure a gun licence for child killer Thomas Hamilton, but was also a member of a clandestine paedophile ring, reportedly set up by Hamilton for the British elite. On the 13th of March 1996, Hamilton, armed with 4 handguns, opened fire on a junior school class, killing 16 children and 1 teacher, before turning the gun on himself, shattering forever the idyllic 13th century Scottish town of Dunblane. Lord Robertson was the referee on Thomas Hamilton's shotgun licence. Well, it may be this is a good time coming up to start revisiting what really happened at Dunblane, and hopefully an independent Scottish government, a truly independent Scottish government, would start to expose the Westminster links to the cover-up here. So let me just go through this with you. Dunblane, 18 years ago, but massive questions. No proper autopsy and no inquest on Thomas Hamilton. The questions: was he a scapegoat to get rid of evidence of a paedophile ring of MPs and Freemasons in Scotland? There seemed to be mounting evidence to prove this theory. Thomas Hamilton, he received the shotgun licence even though he was turned down by normal channels. So why was Lord Robertson not prosecuted for refereeing his application? And why did Thomas Hamilton shoot himself with a different gun from the one he shot the kids with, even though the first gun still had rounds in it? And just like certain other instances, like Madeleine McCann, and by the way, I can absolutely recommend Richard D. Hall's outstanding series of documentaries on the Maddie McCann saga. So just search Richard D. Hall and Maddie McCann and take a look at the 4 one-hour documentaries that he's put together on that subject. So here we are. Who are they? The Dunblane inquiry was a cover-up, and peers bullied me to keep quiet, says Lord Burton, the ex-Masonic leader. Scottish Freemasonry is right through the upper echelons of Scottish society. It's estimated that there are some 75,000 Freemasons in Scotland. The man at the top of the tree right now is Brother Charles Ian Robert Woolridge Gordon. He's the 110th Master of the Grand Lodge of Ancient Free and Accepted Masons of Scotland. And the responsibility is going to be very firmly on his shoulders to perhaps even make Freemasonry transparent in Scotland. Never has there been a better opportunity. And also there's the opportunity for an independent Scottish government to lift the 100 years ceiling on the investigation into the Dunblane massacre. And my conjecture is that Lord Robertson, of course, is probably somewhat central to that inquiry. Meanwhile, of course, some other things that Scotland needs to address. Many of you will be familiar with the case of Robert Greene. And we're looking at a totalitarian police state potentially in Scotland at the moment, where anybody who dares challenge the state is effectively locked up under house arrest indefinitely. So is that going to be addressed by an independent Scotland? Somehow I don't see that happening with the current players at the helm. So the onus will be on the Scottish people to make sure that those people who are leading the nation genuinely have the best interests of the Scottish people at heart and are simply not doing this to feather their own nests. You know, with the yes vote, an end to bloody imperialism. But, is it one sort of bloody imperialism to be replaced by some other bloody regime, which may actually be a lot closer to home? So this is a tremendous opportunity for Scotland to achieve genuine independence. There are many people out there who can offer the appropriate advice and guidance for Scotland to become independent. Of course, the day after independence, the next thing that I would do is nationalise the oil industry. This is a resource that Scotland needs to ensure is for the benefit of its people. It needs to look at the Norwegian model and how Norway, with its relatively small population, has effectively been able to ensure that the entire population benefits from this wonderful natural gift. There is a risk, of course, if Scotland... So where did I get to before it crashed? I think I covered Robert Greene, the wonders of live broadcast here. And then I made the observation that this would be, the yes vote would indeed be, as Scottish Labour Party put here on this billboard, an end to bloody imperialism. But the big risk is that there becomes another form of bloody imperialism, and that would be driven by none other than NATO. Because, of course, if Scotland did blow off the Rothschilds banking system, if they did nationalise their oil, if they did do a Gaddafi and start ensuring that the population of Scotland benefited from the wealth of the country, then you could bet your bottom dollar that we would soon start to be reading reports in the English media that Scotland was suspected of having weapons of mass destruction, and that we were within 45 minutes of being attacked from north of the border, and we would have to be preparing ourselves for an invasion. Well, that's many a true word spoken in jest and all that, but this is a tremendous opportunity for the Scottish people. McSqueaky bum time. Scotland vote too close to call. This was from the Sun today. Well, you know what? I don't think it's too close to call at all. I think this is going to be an overwhelming yes vote. But this is going to be like Ireland, where when I was over in Ireland giving a series of lectures prior to the final vote as to whether or not Ireland was going to sign up to the Treaty of Lisbon, and I didn't meet a single person that was going to vote yes, and yet supposedly the outcome was a yes vote. So call it a hunch. But I think that there is a very good chance that the manipulations have already been prepared. Stuffed ballot boxes have been prepared. But if it is so overwhelming, then even that will not be sufficient to convince the people of Scotland, or even the people in the rest of the UK, that Scotland passed up this opportunity to go for independence. And once Scotland's got its independence, then maybe it creates a whole new opportunity for the rest of us in the UK. Maybe it gives an opportunity to start facing up to the fact that we currently have a political elite that are little more than the puppets of socio-psychopathic global corporatists. So somebody else might have said it once upon a time in a slightly different way, but I think the vast majority of Scots have a dream. And I believe that the people of Scotland are on the cusp of being able to realise the first step of that dream. I don't think the journey is going to be easy, but if it was easy, then no one would really appreciate it. It is a tremendous opportunity, and next week I'm going to be looking at a new political initiative in England, a political initiative that might just put the cat amongst the proverbial pigeons. The No Tar Party, none of the above. It is a completely new concept, and whilst I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that a No Tar Party can take over the lead role in Westminster, it may be sufficient to force the political establishment to rethink their agenda. It's time for everyone to get involved. Previously, we've worked on the basis that apathy rules. It's a lot worse than that now. Apathy kills. Join me at 9 o'clock for Fracking Nightmare.